There are a lot of legitimate complaints to be made about Darling in the FranXX, from its lack of original ideas, to its inconsistent design sense, to its nonsensical politics. Insert Shinzo Abe meme here. However, the one complaint that I absolutely will not accept is that the series relies too much on melodrama, and that having this extensive melodrama makes the show worse, because nothing could be further from the truth. Melodrama is one of the greatest things that could have happened to FranXX, and is one of the best things to happen to storytelling in general. As for why, well, strap in folks, because this is a topic that's been waiting to explode from my chest for a while, and I'm about to go full force, so here we go. As usual, we have to start off by asking the broadest question possible. What is melodrama? Surprisingly, the Google definition pretty much hits the nail on the head. A sensational dramatic piece with exaggerated characters and exciting events intended to appeal to the emotions. Now, you might be thinking, Ember, that's a pretty broad definition of melodrama. And you would be right, because melodrama is much broader than you think it is. It's not just relationship spats or bitchy teenage girls or characters crying at each other every other episode. Pretty much any dramatic work that exaggerates its characters and emotions contains some melodrama, be it a romantic comedy or a Shonen Jump action series. Of course, this nebulous and roughly defined nature is also what gets melodrama such a bad reputation in the first place, because people can pretty much point at anything they don't like regarding emotional narratives and say, this is why melodrama sucks. So the bigger question should be, what separates good melodrama from bad melodrama? The first answers that might pop into your head could be reason, or common sense. After all, reason and logic tend to be the backbone of a lot of modern media, and what people seem to crave from a story with a strong narrative. However, pure reason can often be the exact opposite of what melodrama strives for. Melodrama is fueled by very personal emotions, and humans are not perfectly sound in their reasoning all the time. Reasoning still isn't that far off from the truth, though. Rather than pure logical reasoning, understanding emotional reasoning, i.e. how emotions affect people's thoughts and actions, is the key to understanding melodrama. Why a character feels a certain way is just as important as the feeling itself, because it informs us about the character and what they value. With all that out of the way, I guess we can jump right into that scene. You know, that one. The one that got people to send literal death threats to the writing staff and voice actresses, but to me seemed like the only logical place the story could go at that point. Let me break it down for you. In the lead up to this scene, there are two conflicting emotional narratives going on at the same time, both revolving around the fact that being Zero Two's partner has led Hiro to become severely injured on several occasions, the last of which nearly costing him his life. On the one hand, this has made Hiro's friends, especially Ichigo, extremely worried about him, and so they isolate him from Zero Two in the hopes of forcing distance between them. Eventually, Zero Two also sees the harm that she's causing Hiro, and so she decides to leave willingly. Hiro tries to stop her, but Ichigo holds him back by confessing to him and kissing him. Was this the logical action to take? Of course not. Was it selfish? Probably. But try to understand the reasoning behind the emotion. Imagine seeing the person you care about the most being physically broken by his partner, and watching him be unable to relieve himself of this suffering, convincing himself that things will work out somehow. Now imagine that you've finally found him an out, and the only thing that comes to your mind to keep him from falling back towards his doom is, maybe I can replace her so he doesn't have to suffer anymore. Again, it doesn't really make sense from an objective outsider's view, but in the heat of the moment, the idea of I can't let him go back to her leading to I can replace her seems like a reasonable succession of events. Then, on the other end, you have Zero Two's perspective. A literal science experiment who has known mostly pain for her entire life and very few stable connections to other people, has finally reunited with the one person she cares most about. Then, when she's at her most vulnerable, a bunch of losers she doesn't really care about take away that person and leave her all alone again. If that were you, imagine what that would do to what's left of your fragile psyche. Imagine how you would do anything, and hurt anyone, just to get back that small sliver of stability. Again, this doesn't make her actions right. That's what the entire show was trying to say in the first place, because it's literally an analogy for an abusive relationship. I'm just trying to show why the characters act this way, because apparently basic levels of emotional conveyance are being totally lost on some people, and I have to explain it in the simplest terms possible. There's also the argument that the characters are just bad people in general, thus birthing most of the melodrama that exists in FranXX, and that the show is worse because of this. I already briefly touched on this in the second video of my Naruto analysis series, so I guess I could expand on it a bit here. Though not mutually exclusive, there is a very big difference between a bad character and a bad person in fiction. A bad character is one whose internal logic makes no sense or is incongruent with the story, and thus the story suffers because of this. There are a lot of ways that this can happen with a character, but if you're paying attention, it's pretty easy to spot the ones that stick out. On the other hand, a good character who is a bad person still obeys the narrative and emotional rules set down by the writing, but simply creates a more negative impact on the general diegesis of the story, not the story's quality. They make the events of the story turn out negative and make other characters feel upset or angry, but they aren't indicative of a lower quality of writing. I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that most villains in fiction are bad people. However, said villains are usually given a positive element or two that makes them feel less evil and spiteful so that we can better relate to them. And even when they aren't, it's easy to just shrug it off and say, well, they're villains, so they're supposed to act like that. However, it's when this idea is applied to protagonists that we enter the realm of this character is a bad person and therefore the story is bad, which is a line of thinking that I just can't follow at all. People fighting for a good cause can be just as nasty and heartless as those fighting for a bad one. I'm pretty sure the past couple election cycles have proven this, so the argument that a supporting protagonist is a bad character if they constantly act like a bad person is just kinda ludicrous to me. The Ichigo 0-2 conflict is definitely applicable here, but I feel that Mitsuru is a much better example. Throughout most of the first half, Mitsuru is just kind of a dick, especially towards Hiro, for seemingly no reason other than Mitsuru is kind of a dick. I can accept that people don't like his character because of this, but I don't understand why this would make him a bad character. If anything, it makes him one of the more interesting characters in the show because we get to see him slowly change and soften up as he experiences more personal and intimate interactions with others, in particular Kokoro, which, by the way, is one of the most blatant attempts at symbolism in this story because Kokoro literally means heart, but people still missed it anyway, and the reveal of the misunderstanding between him and Hiro in the past makes his dickish attitude feel more believable. It's not exactly the most unique or interesting idea, but it makes sense because there are real people that act like this. To briefly cut away from FranXX, for a moment of enlightenment I had with this concept, I was catching up on Hugto Precure around the time FranXX was ending, and episode 14 showed me one of the most comically nasty characters I've ever seen. This fashion designer is walking past a daycare where young children are crying, and so she walks up to the daycare lady and starts berating her because the crying children made her lose track of an idea she had. I just sat there and thought, wow, this is easily one of the most over-the-top, nasty, unrealistic characters I've ever seen. And then I remembered that I had just read an article about some bitter old woman calling the police on a bunch of black people having a barbecue in a public park. And suddenly, the cranky fashion designer didn't seem so over the top. Bad, nasty people exist in real life, and denying their existence isn't going to help anything. Pretending that this kind of character is unrealistic is not only factually wrong, but also harmful in regards to how you view the world. Now, if you just don't have a preference for consuming media that has these kinds of characters in it, then that's totally fine. Hell, sometimes I'm right with you on that. Nobody likes being around nasty and negative people all the time, and I'd certainly be lying if I said it wasn't a lot more fun to watch something like Pokemon Sun and Moon, where all of the protagonists are good and nice and get along almost all the time. However, to say that a piece of media is bad because it contains characters that are mean and nasty and are constantly creating excess melodrama is just not a good argument. Complaining about melodrama in a story trying to have interesting character interactions is like complaining about water being wet. Look, On my anime list, there are 12 anime that over 1 million people have on their lists. 7 of them are action-adventure series, 4 are thrillers, and the last one is Angel Beats, one of the most hyper-melodramatic anime I've ever seen, and also one of the most intensely emotional experiences I've ever had with an anime. Episode 3 was the first time I ever cried over an anime as an adult. I normally hate using this argument because of what it implies elsewhere, but shows like this are popular for a reason. There's a reason people still talk about Angel Beats almost a decade later, and it's because they can get so easily invested in the melodramatic story of these characters. In fact, almost all of the shows on this list have some elements of melodrama one way or the other. Tokyo Ghoul's endless tragedy, One Punch Man's charismatic speeches, Future Diaries relationship drama. These are elements that people often point out as their favorite parts of each of these shows, and they're all melodrama. Humans crave melodrama because humans are melodramatic. It is part of our social and literary evolution. From Oedipus to Hamlet to Heathcliff to Seth Rollins to Mizore and Nozomi, melodrama is everywhere, and it is good because it is something that we can relate to and empathize with. It is the driving element behind almost all of your favorite series. There's a reason that anime's best melodrama writer is so diverse in her genre repertoire, and why they got her of all people to work on a Gundam series, which, by the way, is hands down one of the most melodramatic sci-fi franchises I've ever seen. Seriously, did you watch Zeta Gundam? That shit had melodrama flowing out of every orifice, and it is all the better for it. Melodrama has been a cornerstone of anime writing for fucking ever, and it certainly isn't going away anytime soon. So find something else to complain about aside from an element that well over half of all stories in existence have. Good lord, I really just tried to convince people that melodrama is good. And in FranXX, no less. I didn't even think FranXX was that good, I just thought it was a good case study. Well, I guess it can't get any worse, right? Oh. Oh god, no. Anything but that. Anything else. Oh dear. Special thanks to Jan Rogalski, Rorkton Joing, Christine Seibert, Tim Johnson, Call Me Catlord, Diane Wierzbicki, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.